Yeah.
And obviously weather's not
Yeah,
a
exactly.
great big help either. So
Jess, you're basically live. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you control because you're a very controlling woman, right? Apparently, when I was left alone with Josh in the caravan, right, he said, I'm so pleased to be away from Jess because she's so controlling.
I wouldn't be surprised.
So Jess, it's over to you, and have a great thing, and give me a call afterwards. Take care.
Yeah, perfect. Take care. Speak to you soon, Carl.
Bye. Guys, we love you lots. I'll see you soon. I can talk and you can hear me. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Oh, well, it's good that we know the issue of Carl's internet. It's the time, which is the same here for me. But ours is just at a really weird time. It's from 5 o'clock till 6-ish. But what we'll do, we were talking about that shipwreck, weren't we, Anne? Absolutely fantastic find, really. I think it's really well preserved. I think for something like that, you can even just see the writing on the back of it. It says endurance on the back.
I suppose it's not such a long time ago as
no, but
but you know, it was apparently it is in really good condition, and they're so excited about it.
I think people are excited because when you compare it to the Titanic, which this was 107 years old, this ship that has been found, and the Titanic is much closer to our time period than that, and that's in awful preservation. So I think the fact that this is so well preserved, I think everyone loves it. So this is absolutely fantastic, I think, personally, and it's only before time we know more about it. But I wouldn't like to be the divers in charge of that excavation at all, especially with how dark the water is there. I feel like something could come out of nowhere and just snap you up. It's not in a nice sunny place where you could see all the water in front of you and feel completely safe. But it was for what I read about it, it was this ship, the Endurance. It was trapped in sea ice for months before it was sunk. Oh, sorry, I got the date wrong. It sunk in 1915. Do you know what? I keep thinking that we're still not in 2022. I keep thinking that we're in an earlier time. I think I am still living in the 2010, 2011 time period. It was a much easier time, I think, but in general. But the discovery of this wreck is a fantastic achievement. It's only 2 years after the Titanic, so I think when you compare it to the Titanic, even though it's about 3 years younger, this ship is great preservation. But I think people were expecting it to be very poorly preserved. Again, it's a ship. I love shipwrecks. They're like little time capsules. Obviously we'll know more about this one than any other one from the medieval period, which drives me gaga, but absolutely fantastic. It was spotted at a depth of 3,008 meters, and it took them 2 weeks to find it in general. So it was absolutely fantastic. A very large area that they were looking as well, so it wasn't a very easy find, but they done a big basically route around the whole thing, looking at Elephant Island as well. But I think what we can see is the fact that it was stuck in ice. The ice is so far away from it now, and I think it just shows how much ice is melting, again adding more water to and taking more land off us. So I think that's what really we're seeing from all of this. But when more comes out of it, I can't wait to discuss it a little bit more. So thank you for that, Anne. It was my highlight of this week as well. Richard, is there any news off you this week?
No, nothing really. Nothing new.
No, that's fine. And Pat, anything from you?
No, sorry.
No, that's fine. That's perfect. We'll get into today. So what I've been doing here is that I've been looking at obviously Wales, but I've been adding a little bit of England to it. just because I just feel like it's nice to have that comparison. And a lot of my inspirations sometimes do come from looking at things in England, and then I think, oh, is there anything or any evidence of that in Wales? And obviously there's lots of hilltops in Wales. A book that I was reading kind of made me feel a little bit off of what they had to say about that, but we'll discuss it further. Have to warn you, I think I've lost the final slide on this. So what I'll do, I'll just rattle on at the end. Stop share, I didn't mean to press that. Oh, every week there's always an issue with me trying to figure out how to use this right from the beginning. So last week we were looking at burials, prehistoric burials, and we were looking at different ways, and we were kind of basically saying, like, ancient tombs is what I called it. And we were looking at all the standing stones and all these cairns and all these dolmens. It was really interesting. I think it is interesting to look at, especially how you can see it in the landscape. And it just makes you wonder as well, because there isn't, well, from what I could read, this one book that I have here in front of me is that the tombs that would have held multiple bodies that we talked about, round barrows and other numerous other tombs, etc. This only accounts for what they think is 10% of the estimated prehistoric population in Britain. So it's led to some people arguing actually that these burials were for highly respected individuals, and that possibly other individuals could have been put into shallow graves or cremated. And it just makes you wonder that we could be standing on top of a burial of someone without even knowing it. And I just thought that's what archaeology is, really, isn't it? That you could be standing on top of something and not even know. There's always little gems being found everywhere. And so I thought we'll keep on with our prehistoric theme, and we'll look at hill forts. I think that the ones that I'll be talking from Wales, I think that they're quite commonly known, but I just wanted to bring attention to Caerau because well, I used to live in Caerau, so it was something that I would always go to, and even looking at the St Mary's Church, that was something that I loved going to as well. And I know they're planning on building a visitor centre in Caerau, so I wanted to give some attention to that as well, which I think is absolutely fantastic. I think it was is at the National Museum of Wales. You have Cardiff Council, and you have I think it's Cardiff University, and then some other organisations as well, which I will talk about, that have put money into it and funding and time and brought volunteers together to help create this visitor centre. And it's something that I'm hearing a lot of at the moment, just by people in Cardiff, that people seem to be excited, and that's what I love to hear. So last week, like I said, we looked at burials, and I think today it's best to look at the domestic aspect of the prehistoric period. I think it's very difficult to get that aspect out there. A lot of people focus on burials, and burials are fantastic. But just to look at how they lived, and these hill forts are great, fantastic echoes of the past that can tell us more about where we were living, our ancestors, what did it look like, and try and see what some of the archaeology that has come from it. Caerau Hill Fort is one that has produced some really interesting and fantastic artifacts, which I really want to have a look at. The one of the glass bead, it was just absolutely beautiful, so we will focus on that. But I think what I love about hill forts is that you can interact with them. Like I said, with Caerau, I always used to go there when I was a child and just sort of walk around, and I always used to have images in my head of what I used to think everything would have looked like and how it would have panned out. And I still do that today. Every time I walk down an old street, or walk past an old building, or looking at something that's all maybe portable art, I always just think about the person that's holding it, or the person that's walking down that street, or the little arguments, or the lovely little moments between lovers, and just that everyday aspect of life. I try and fit that in as much as I can. My mind goes wild with these things, and definitely the trip that we'll be having this weekend in Chichester, which I'm really excited about. When we will go to these sites, that is something that I will be having playing in my head, just sort of thinking about these sites and how they would have looked like in the past. I think reconstructions, again, it all depends on interpretations, and I think people take reconstructions as fact. So we won't be focusing that much on reconstructions today, because I could sit there all day like I do with all my other lessons on a Thursday and just rip the reconstructions to shreds, because I just feel like I could be really picky about it. So if I just quickly get my notes up here. There you go. Ooh, sorry, I just had a silly pop-up on my phone. So what we'll do is that we'll look at them, and I just want to talk about these fantastic structures. So this is a really fantastic one. Oh, hang on a minute, before I go back on, I just wanted to sort of quickly touch upon hill forts as well. But we'll be focusing mostly on Iron Age hill forts today. It's around about 843 AD, so 800 BC to 43 AD. But we might be looking at a little earlier time period, because some of them would have been constructed a little bit earlier. But these hill forts, they would have had the earliest hill forts that we have evidence of, that they can be single line of defences, which would have a timber palisade on wall on top of an earth bank with an external ditch, and this would have formed this rectangular enclosure around a settlement. And we would have had storage, we would have had livestock, we would have had people living there as well. They would have started at the end of the Bronze Age, but is this flurry of construction that happens between 800 to 700 BC at the start of the Iron Age, where we see these fantastic constructions of these hill forts. And we'll be looking at Dinas Powys as well, and we'll be looking at how hill forts can actually change their purpose and still be relevant to us as time goes on. And obviously in this day and age, we're seeing a lot more focus on bringing a visitor centre, bringing it to the people in the local community, which is what I love, and that's what I like to see. So I think that the most obvious and immediately impressive hill forts can be dated from the later, or the golden age of defensive construction, which is around about 400 BC to 100 BC. And they would have been known as developed or multi-walled hill forts. So there would have been a lot of defence going on with these structures as well. And I think that's one thing to notice as well, is how hill forts would have stayed in use as well into the Roman period. I think a lot of people sort of see the Roman period as like everything changes overnight, but I think that another reason why the Romans were so successful here is that, yes, they did come here, they did conquer. However, I feel like they live in these hill forts, they let us have our beliefs still, and that's why we wanted to have a bit of Rome, because we felt that connection. And so this is why you have groups of people trying to conquer Britain throughout history, and it just doesn't seem to work, because it's almost like they've become too forceful. Whereas we're happy to take on things as long as we're allowed to live the way we want to live. But some of these finds, you will have the odd Roman artifact popping up, because again, this would have been signs of trading as well. But the interiors of these hill forts would have been big enough, like I said, to house a whole community. This would have had their grain stores, this would have had their animals, their craft working areas. And sometimes the archaeological evidence might not be that definitive in arguing that, but we can argue that just based on the size or possibly what we could have found. And I think Cairo kind of ticked those boxes for me in certain aspects. So we'll be looking at, for example, they found some wheat grain from the Iron Age in Cairo, and in my eyes, that just ticks the boxes with grain storage. I think each settlement's going to provide different levels of archaeological material that will be valuable, but I think what is important is to look at these sites all together. So these fantastic structures, I think, is another reason why Wales and the rest of Britain was seen as strong as in their tribes, because they had these fantastic structures. And I remember when I was actually looking at prehistory, obviously in Wales as a child, it was on this BBC website. It was Celts. We weren't given a time period, it was just Celts. But this game is always stuck in my head. You had to be this Celt or Briton, whatever way you want to look at it, sort of walking around Roman town, and then you'd go back to his hill fort, and you could create your own hill fort on this game, and it's just always stuck with me. So this is something that I always have in my head when I'm talking about this. So while we're looking at these sites, just know that I'm imagining a tiny little ginger person with face paint on them, because that's something that's always stuck with me from the age of 7. But you can see how these hill forts are still visible for us today, and is there for us to look at, to study, to interact with, to have our aspect of the past brought over to us. So what we'll do, we'll start looking into them, and I think what we'll see as time goes on, so obviously there's different phases to construction, there's obviously different phases to a hill fort as well. You find how, for example, we'll call it period 1, there could be just a single ditch with entranceways on either end coming through, and then there will be another ditch added in period 2, and then there would have been more of a side, for example, an enlargement, possibly something on the side, which we will see in lots of these hill forts. So what I'll do, I'll just quickly show you. So this would have been this here. This would have been period 1 in itself here. And then as we get to period 2, there would have been another sort of bank all around the edge of it, like that we see here. And then period 3 example, you would have had all these little added parts to the structure. It could have been for storage, and then obviously you would have had in period 4 just more of a defense around all of that there as well. So it's very complicated when you can see more of a ditch here as well. And just looking at the aerial photography of this, absolutely fantastic. And again, it's a lot of people sort of look at the defensive side, and it is for defense, it's for protection as well, but it's also for keeping things in. If you've got animals running wild in there, you don't want them running off all the way over there. You're going to want them close to your community. And this was definitely an interesting one that I looked at. This was something that it came to my attention when I was reading my book, sort of a book that I have where you can just walk around Britain and just sort of experience everything that's around you. And this is one of those things. I think they're more impressive when you look at these sites from aerial photography, because I will admit, for example, Cairo, when I've gone there, it just looks like a field. But obviously, when you know what you're looking for, it starts making it more clearer. But I think this is why we need more funding to actually bring attention to something like this. So people can know what to look for, so they can actually interact with it as well. So this is Maiden Castle. This is in Dorset, and this is the largest and most complex Iron Age hill fort in Europe. It's about the size of 50 football pitches as well, so that's a way of putting it down. This was first built it was first constructed in 600 BC. It was a very basic one, and then it was remodeled and enlarged to fit in this new community throughout time. So it was around about the 1st century BC actually that we start to see these multiple ramparts as well, and you can see how when it was first built this would have looked completely different. It was gleaming with white chalk ramparts that would have towered over the surrounding landscape and protected hundreds of citizens and their belongings and all their trade and the things to live on, would have protected them inside of this. So there has been excavations here that has revealed much about Maiden Castle's history. So we learn about that there was a Neolithic enclosure around about 3500 BC, and it was even a Roman temple built there in the 4th century AD. But archaeologists have also found evidence here of a late Iron Age cemetery, and many of those who were buried had suffered horrific injuries. So a lot of people have been talking about was this evidence of a battle, for example? Was this the people of the community trying to protect their most loved structure? And yeah, it's definitely interesting to see that. And you see some people, again, you will never, ever escape this argument that some people argue that this is Camelot. I just, every time I read something and it has some sort of possibly rounded structure or anything like that, whether it's big or a hill fort, Camelot's got to slot his way in some way through there as well. But there was excavations here from the 1930s to then also in the 1980s, which has shed a lot of light of the development of this hill fort and the origins of this Neolithic enclosure that was there as well. But it is a very complex Iron Age hill fort, and there's many different aspects to this. It's not just this clear cut. And this is why I just wanted to start with something like this today. So this would have had origins of a Neolithic enclosure, and this would have had modification obviously in the Iron Age, and then this Romano-British temple that was built there as well. So quickly we'll go through the Neolithic activities. So this impressive hill fort was not the first monument on this hilltop, like I've said. There was excavations that were done here that saw this complex sequence of occupation. This is an area that was held quite dearly to everyone for many, many, many thousands of years. And this would have been 6,000 years ago that we start to see some sort of evidence of occupation. So in the early Neolithic period, this hilltop was cleared of woodland, and an oval enclosure of 2 segmented ditches were built on top of the eastern plateau. And this caused this causeway enclosure. And this would have there was gaps in between the ditches. So this was one of the earliest types of monuments in Britain for this area. But finds from the excavation suggested that this was a symbolic place where people gathered to carry out specialized activities such as flint axe production. Now, I don't understand whether they're saying whether my note is saying symbolic place because religious aspects, or whether this is just something to say that there was flint axe production here. But simply there was flint axe production here, and they're finding that in the evidence. I will say, unfortunately, I couldn't find any images of some of the finds here, which really infuriates me the most, because when you're reading about it, it is nice to have a look at what there's been found. But shortly after this enclosure went out of use, a long mound was constructed, and it was flanked by 2 ditches. So this would have been nearly 550 meters long, and this extraordinary bank barrow would have been can only be seen today. So this barrow possibly represented would have represented the ancestors of the community, and act as maybe a marker or even a boundary in the landscape for those as well, because that's something in this time period you would mark very significant things as you're going as markers, and this could have acted as one as well. But then we get to the Iron Age period. So after a period of reduced activity, the first hill fort was constructed in the early Iron Age here, and it was enclosed by a single rampart, and it was built on top of an earlier enclosure, like I've said, but it was later extended to the west to enclose more than the double of the original area. So throughout this period, there was extra ramparts being added. There was an inner rampart as well that was heightened. The entrances of the fort become more complex as ramparts were added and gateways were being designed. So this is just getting more developed, more advanced as time is going on. But in the later Iron Age periods, defences seem to have become less important. The inner bank and the ditch were refurbished at least once. They felt like this wasn't their main focus, was to defend themselves. It seemed like this was a community that was just going about its day. It seemed quite calm. Everything's running smoothly. Why would there be any need if there was no danger to everyone, basically? And we would have seen more of an entranceway sort of coming from the part where there's a lot more, what some people have described, my sister, squiggly lines. So life in the hill fort. So when we look at the occupation of this hill fort, changed, progressed, things changed, different ways of living. Obviously, this seems to be a community of people that didn't have to worry about defence that much, but maybe because they knew that this was so complex that they didn't need more defence. But this would have been home to a small, self-sufficient community, and following. But in the following 400 years after that, it became the preeminent settlement in southern Dorset. This became really big, and excavations have discovered early Iron Age post holes in square arrangements within the hill fort. So that's quite interesting, because we're normally seeing circular buildings, but what we're seeing here is these square arrangements. And this kind of led me to think that maybe there's some sort of Roman influence here. If this was eventually going to have a Roman temple on there, then it does seem to make sense that maybe they didn't feel the need for defense. They felt like, ooh, the Romans are here. We're not really happy with it at the beginning, but let's go and see what's going on. And so again, this game is coming into my head from my childhood, going out into these little Roman cities, possibly having a look around, smelling all the different foods that are being cooked, seeing all the different things that are being made, and thinking, well, we've got some stuff that they might want, and they've got some stuff that we might want. So perfect trades going on there as well. It seems like that this community really did embrace a bit of Rome in them. So with these square buildings, and this temple, this Romano-British temple as well, it seems like they wanted a bit of Rome, and it was because they weren't entirely forced. But again, this would have had above ground stores for keeping grain, ensuring that there wasn't damp, that it can get, that no animals could get to it as well. But it was also in the surrounding fields, there would have been areas to get grain. Obviously, could have had more animals as well if the community was just growing. But at the height of this occupation, this was densely populated. And there were many roundhouses here as well. They had central hearths, they had large pits for storing grain. They also had drainage gullies here as well. And various finds on this site shows textile production and metalworking. So there you go, there's something that the Romans might want from us. So we can trade our textiles and our metalworking. We can show off our skills, and maybe that's why there was a connection. That's how trade goes. But it seems like a very advanced community of people. And in the Middle Iron Age, the layout of the interior of the hill fort was reorganised. So randomly arranged houses were now built in regimented rows, with traffic guided along roads. This would have had control over social life as well, how people would have lived. This would have been something that's changed. But as we get to the later Iron Age period, it seems like this organised system broke down, and the focus of the settlement again was at the eastern end of this hill fort. And at this time, increasing trade with the continent and special industries such as metalworking had become very important to them. And I just want to talk about the war cemetery and the Romans as well. So in the 1930s, Sir Mortimer Wheeler and Tessa Verney Wheeler uncovered many details of this hill fort. In the final season of their excavations, Sir Mortimer Wheeler uncovered an extensive late Iron Age cemetery of more than 52 burials. Some of the male skeletons from this cemetery had horrific injuries, such as whacks to the head. You could see that some of the individuals would have had cuts on their arms. And he believed that this was a war cemetery. This was evidence for a Roman attack on the hill fort, which was following their invasion of Britain in 43 AD. Again, I don't know. It could have been some other war. It could have been with a nearby tribe. But again, we'll go with this. So the hill fort, most of the hill forts in Wessex went out of use again in the late Iron Age period, and this was still occupied at the time of the Roman conquest in 43 AD. And the Second Legion Augusta under the leader Vespasian is indeed to have known to lead a campaign through this part of southern England. But 70 years since these excavations, and ideas about this cemetery has changed. God, I don't know why it always has to be war, but only a small proportion of individuals have actually died from violent injuries here. So he clearly looked at the small proportion of individuals and sort of took it as painting them all with the same brush. But people were carefully buried with grave goods, not only just personal ornaments such as beads, brooches, rings, pottery, also joints of meat. This would have they wouldn't have done this if this was hastily dug graves that had to be done after a single battle with a lot of stress as well. This clearly shows that this was just a cemetery over time, keeping the community together. But again, this could have been, you could have had battle-scarred warriors that could have tried defending this hill fort from the Romans, but they could have been involved in local confrontation as well. But I just wanted to bring that up. Even just looking at it, you can see how there's pottery all over these individuals. So I don't know why Sir Mortimer Wheeler would think that this was a war grave. But again, a few decades after the arrival of the Romans, this hill fort was abandoned. And this was then a home for a temple complex that was built on the hill. So again, this fused this native British and classical Roman religion as well, which was popular. And you found these shrines that located in these remote rural locations. This abandoned hill fort was perfect. And that's the history of this place. I just thought it was absolutely fantastic, and that's what inspired me straight away. But we'll look at another English one, and then all the rest are Welsh. Thank God. So we love English history as well. We like to compare them, but I know this is a historic Wales one, and this is why I'm saying thank God, because I don't want you to think that I've forgotten Wales at all in any of this. But again, let's go to this one here. So this is in Shropshire, and is 540 feet high. Has elaborate earthworks as well that are made up of not very defensible. It's not in a very defensible location, but it's still something to marvel at, nonetheless. Sorry, looking at the wrong notes here. So if we could just quickly go into the history of this as well. So this would have been built and occupied during the Iron Age. Again, this is something with a great fort, and you can see where there would have been entrances coming in on either end here. All protection all around here. Obviously, you've got the next lot of them going on here. Really awful drawings of myself, I will say, but you can see how there's also it develops. You can see how there's you can see the different phases of this, how the different periods, how it obviously developed throughout time. This is one of the best preserved hill forts in Britain, and during this period Britain was divided into obviously different tribal territories. The hill fort was probably a stronghold and a principal settlement of one of these tribes, which is Cornovy or Doffies. I literally cannot say these words, but Ordovvices. Go on, Anne. Go on. You're better at this than me.
Ordovvices.
Yes, thank you very much. So that's one. That's what they think is either one of those tribes that were inhabiting here. And this would have continued right up until the Roman conquest. And this is kind of, it is basically, and again, it's under the English heritage, but obviously is one of these hill forts that would have been in the marshes area as well. But it remained in use for about 1,000 years. There's a large community that's living here that really did see the need of this, and it really worked well for them to live 1,000 years. So the excavations in 1939 were published in the 1990s, actually. So there was excavations, but it was obviously published for everyone to read then online in the 1990s, and it just showed how this complex defensive ramparts that surrounded the hill fort were not built at the same time. And so that, again, like I said, it was these 4 distinctive phases that we see with these hill forts. And again, you have period 1, period 2, period 4, and you just see how it develops over time. So again, I just think it just shows how this community is expanding. The need for storage needs to be expanded as well. But this was used from the Neolithic period as well. But as we get to the later Bronze Age and the Iron Age period, this is where things start to ramp up. So they did have a discovery of stone, axe and flint tools here that suggested it was first occupied in the Neolithic period. But the first direct evidence of a settlement dates to 1000 BC, so before the first ramparts were even built. The settlement seems to be surrounded by some sort of palisade or fence, and each roundhouse was built using wooden posts with a wattle and dub walls. And the central post in these roundhouses would have been supported by a thatched roof with a hearth inside. But there was pottery that was being discovered here as well from the Iron Age period. But there was even such industrial activities that were found here, such as bronze melting that was taking place here on this hill fort. But when we get to the early Iron Age period, you start to see how there was they found 2 houses during these excavations that were 7 meters in diameter, and they had these central halves as well. But they found several shards of Iron Age pottery that had been imported from Wiltshire, and salt containers from Cheshire as well. So this shows this community had this long distance trading links at the time. And again, I think this is one thing that's a nice aspect of all of these hill forts, trade and interconnectedness and connections with other individuals seems to be a big part of these hill forts as well, which I like that. But again, aerial photography again is showing us this possible Iron Age settlement, these field systems nearby, and this would have supplied them with grain as well, and would have helped them keep their animals together with these field systems, because field systems aren't necessarily people owning land. Like Karl is given a great example of his sheep. They will eat anything and everything that comes in their way, and trees are going to be eaten, so you wouldn't want the sheep or any other livestock eating your crops. You're going to keep them in a separate field. But this was, again, this was a place of, it's possible that this could have been a place of refuge as well when there was the population was in times of conflict, nearby population. But this was abandoned after the Roman period, and this become an earthwork known as Wat's Dyke, and this was similar to the longer Offa's Dyke, which we have talked about, which was by King Offa in the 8th century to separate his Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Mercia from the British kingdoms in Wales. But unlike Woffa, Wat is known as a historical figure, and recent dating evidence suggests that Wat's Dyke was probably built sometime before Offa's Dyke. So it may have been an earlier border between the Anglo-Saxon and the British population, or perhaps it just defined the western boundary of what is now forgotten as a kingdom, which ruled Shropshire, Cheshire, in an area that was of the post-Roman period. During the First World War, the hill fort was actually used as a military training area as well for troops. It was based in the nearby Park Hall camp, and the poet Wilfred Owen, who was born nearby, completed his army training here. And trenches were dug here, and the use of explosives were also used. So you do see these shallow craters, and they are sometimes mistaken as archaeological features. They are really, but not in terms of this hill fort. And I remember teaching a class, again, this was a while ago, but I remember looking at trenches in Britain for training in the World Wars. But the archaeology of the interior of the fort as well, due to all of this, has been damaged, which is a shame, really. But it's some fantastic online sources that you can actually go into and read all about the history, which is fantastic with these sites. So we get to my favourite one here, Cairo Hill Fort. So I thought if I put a plan in there of this hill fort, you could really see how even just walking up this hill fort, it really does sort of drain you, because you do walk from up sort of towards here this way, and then you end up like that. It's draining walking up that hill. So you can imagine if you're going to try and take over this community, you're going to be exhausted by the time you get there. But it's really impressive, and I love the fact that more attention has been given to this more recently. Is an impressive size, again reflects a large community that live there, and is providing a lot of rich archaeological information, which I absolutely love. And this is the third largest Iron Age hill fort in Glamorgan. And this, you've got 13 acres that is enclosing, and is surrounded by obviously a housing estate and the A4232. And again, it's absolutely fantastic. The church in itself is fantastic with the history. It's thought to date from the 13th century, and it's been added to, and it closed in the 70s. My nan remembers going to that church, but this whole hill fort is absolutely fantastic, and I know Time Team has had their stuck their noses in a little bit, and I love that. And more is being found here. I know they're thinking of doing a few more excavations as well before they do the visitor centre, but this is the plan. And it was a stronghold of a powerful Suez tribe who inhabited this part of Wales before the arrival of the Romans. And it's definitely something that what I like to see is that the people of Cardiff have really taken this into their hearts. They see the importance of it, and they want to bring this to the local community. They want to allow people to actually interact with this, and I think it would definitely be something that's really fantastic for children as well. So some of the finds they're finding here is absolutely fantastic. These archaeologists are getting really excited over the finds here, and I think some of the finds that I'll be talking about today were found in 2019. So just before the pandemic, they were doing some work there. I'm not sure whether they're still doing some work at the moment, but this is something that they're bringing the local community on. And this is on the outskirts of Cardiff. So as you get through the suburbs of Cairo and Ely, this Iron Age hill fort that was once a powerhouse of this city, with more than 2,000 years worth of history, was said to be this political hub for the region, and is absolutely fantastic. And I just want to show you some of the finds from the site here. So the first one, they've actually put it in this, obviously this padded box. I did find a better image, but I wasn't able to put it on there. But this is a glass bead. So it's a clear glass bead with this gold swirl in amongst it all. This was 2,500 years old. And then you have these shale bracelet pieces as well that they found. That's found here as well. And then the final image in the end is these wheat grain, the evidence of wheat grain that they found there as well. So the excavations took place between June to July of 2019. They found old pieces of wood, as well as pollen that was found here as well. And it might not sound like much from a glance, but for people who know what hill forts can be like, with the archaeology going missing or not a lot being brought through. This is a lot of evidence for us, and it's absolutely fantastic. Again, this site Caira, it gets its name from the Welsh word fort, but we're having these little aspects, these little puzzle pieces into finding out about the fort's history. So the finds here are exciting. No matter how tiny they are, they're telling us a story. And again, what I think is fantastic here is that Cardiff University, obviously they have people going there, and you have other groups, which I will find the names of all the other organisations involved, but the Museum of Wales as well. They've brought children onto the hill fort to help with learning more about this, bringing that interest into the children. So it was announced that it would get a 1.6 million grant for all of this. And this was a scheme that was proposed by the Action in Caira and Ely, known as ACE, that would have been working with Cardiff University's local schools and even residents. So everyone has been brought into this. And this is what I love about this, is that this is everyone's history in archaeology. Why not get everyone involved? And that is my favourite aspect about all of this. And officials are hoping to discover more interesting finds, and they think that the visitor numbers will increase here on this site as well by 50% over the next 3 years. So, well, it was 2019, so by this year actually. So it was absolutely fantastic. But this would have had, this was triangular in shape. So if I can get rid of the pen drawings, this would have, oh no, I've put a new pen drawing. And this would have been, oh gosh, back. This would have had this, it would have had this, sorry, lost, triangular in shape. It would have had around about 200 homes on the flat ground at the top of the hill. So around about here. So 200 homes here, and this was built around about 600 BC, and people were gathering there. So before the Iron Age, so at the time of the Stone Age's hill fort was being built, and it remains an important place for many centuries. Recent excavations have shown that there was a Roman settlement there as well. They found a Roman pin, which was absolutely fantastic and beautiful to look at. These recent excavations have brought up three questions, really. How were the ramparts built? When were they built? And why were they built? Did they need to defend themselves? And again, I think it'd be quite interesting is that if they're making this a place for people to actually be involved with, it'd be nice to see some experimental archaeology as well. But personally, I feel like I can sort of see that there's entrances that could possibly come in that way. And it seems like that there's definitely 3 to 4 phases. So you'd have first phase going all the way around here. And then you'd have the second phase. And then the third phase could have been adding this little aspect into it. And then the fourth phase adding all of that. But it's definitely an impressive the hilltop as well, just to go past anyway. But the idea is that they're going to take artifacts and samples into schools, so pupils are able to look into these themselves. And do you know what I love about all of this is not experts, I think, that are given their ideas. So obviously experts are going to have their own ideas on this, but they're letting children take charge. And that is what I love. I remember something like this when I was younger. A teacher came in with something and asked us, what is this? What do you think it was? It was a piece of cloth with little beads that were hanging off on the side. And someone said, oh, something to put your ornaments on. And someone said, oh, maybe it was a coaster. And the clever clogs here, of course, I would have to. I said, oh, was it put on top of milk to stop flies going in when it was put away because they didn't have any fridges? And she was like, there you go. And so I think to get children involved, sometimes they might bring something that you have never thought of to mind. And so what they're doing is they're bringing some of these artifacts into schools and seeing what the children have to think about that. And I just think that's lovely, because it, again, is bringing that interest in children. It could spark off a child's inspiration to want to go into this field in the future. So they've worked more than 730 hours on this project. Is included residents from Ely, community groups, residents from Cardiff, and even school children, like I've said, and it's absolutely fantastic. So the future plans this was to include this heritage centre with a series of footpaths around the hill fort, with putting up displays so it can tell the story of the site as well. But further excavations are planned. Obviously, it was planned in 2020, and it would have been carried out in small digs in local residents' back gardens to see if there was more things discovered. So the residents really want to get involved with this. And the community have given good responses for all of this. So I love that. So a lot of people are interested in coming to visit and take part into the archaeology. Again, absolutely fantastic, and I love to see what we learn more from, because my favourite find out of all of this is the beads, because when I get to this is something quite interesting with the bead itself. They believe that the bead itself was actually sorry, gosh, I got messed up there. They think that the beads were actually evidence of maybe trade with another community. Maybe this sort of showed more of a connection with some other groups of people. But again, it's the poor access to this site, I think, is the reason why a lot of local people haven't actually gone there. Like I said, it's a trek to get up to. It's not very easy. It's not very easy to know where to go as well. It is one of those things that if you're interested in something like that, you'll know, or if you're from the local area, you'll know. So it's nice to see that there's routes that are being brought in that are thinking of different individuals or societies, so anyone with disabilities. They're just wanting to make this much more easy than what it is. And I think that's just a lovely thing to add with this as well. So we'll quickly go through these ones here. So Pendennis as well, a really fantastic one that I want to sort of touch upon. This was excavated in the 1930s. There's been more extensive excavation that's going on here, but they found a lot of Stone Age evidence as well. So this is in Wales, this is in Ceredigion, and is among one of the largest in Wales as well. And it's funded by the Welsh Government Historical Environment Service to have more of an investigation into this site. And this was December last year that they're thinking of putting more focus here. But so far, they're able to find bones from different animals. They're finding amber beads and stone and these spindle whorls, which was the spinning of yarn. They're finding all of this here. And Aberystwyth Uni obviously are getting involved with this as well. And they've been working together to be able to find more evidence and to be able to test it so we can have more of a story of what's going on. So they started excavating the southern fort, southern entrance more recently, and they found these amber beads. So the individual that was involved in all of this, he turned around and said that hill forts were places of trade and interconnectedness. It's also a place of power. Now, when you have it by the sea, it's going to be more of a place of trade. And so it's likely that these amber beads could have come from what he believes is the Baltic. Again, a lot of people could argue that, but I think that's a nice connection. Shows that Wales has got some really good connections early on, definitely before the Roman period as well, because I think a lot of people seem to think that we were backwards, we didn't know what we were doing, and it's just pushing us away from that. Wales and the rest of Britain is a melting pot for a lot of, I would say, a lot of cultures, a lot of races, a lot of individuals, because they're coming here and trading with us. And again, that's something to note how advanced these are. But they've done geophys survey here, and they found that there was unrecorded outer defences on the site. But they're continuing. They're hoping to continue more work here this coming summer. So I can't wait to look at that. But they saw that this was a very large community. Again, oh gosh, I'm trying to see. So you can see the different aspects of these defensives here. It seems like there's only 3 phases, but we'll only know because when they finish excavating and doing more research on the site. They're just piecing things together bit by bit, but it's a beautiful site and definitely one that I can't wait to learn about. And then we got Dinas Powys. I do love this place. I looked at this in terms of my research for my master's, looking at the early medieval period, how there was a lot of killing of young cattle, which was quite unusual because clearly it seemed like they were getting an abundance of livestock from somewhere else. And the paper actually talks about Glastonbury and how there was a connection there possibly, and this is the reason why. There's large quantities of pottery here from the Iron Age period that has led people to actually look at this. And Leslie Alcock, he's noted a lot of this and talks about all of this throughout his time period. And it seems to be that this was not just a political hub in the early medieval period. This was a place that was very notable and very important in the Iron Age periods as well. So it has many phases to his history, and I love that. And just again, something that's not very easily accessible, a bit like the Cairo Hill Fort, but again, I don't think they were ever meant to be that accessible to anyone really. It was a way of defence. So as we look into all of this, the Iron Age and the Romano-British period, it was the first phase of this site was the Iron Age period, and there was clearly a community that was settling here around about the 2nd century BCE. There's several post holes that have been excavated inside this fort, and it shows how in the late Iron Age period, there was more individuals coming here, living here. The community's growing. There was 2 southern banks as well that was found at the southern end of the hill of the main fort, and Leslie Alcock was the main excavator here. But there was no evidence of a gateway ever being built between them, so he believes that these banks were maybe a little use of a defensive situation. Maybe they could have been for something else. But archaeologists thought that the hill fort was believe that this would have had defensive structures, and Leslie Alcock is just arguing, I don't really see any of that really there. Why does it always have to be warfare between different tribal groups? And he talks about how this fort was heavily defended, but the southern banks were far less defensible. So why would you leave the south bank ready for people to attack if you've protected the north side? It just didn't make sense to Leslie Alcock, and he argued that defence wasn't his main focus here. And you can see how when we get to the 1st century AD, you see how the 1st century CE in southern Britain, this was where the Roman Empire is creeping up. We see how the native Iron Age British culture is merged into this Romano-British culture, and you can see that there's evidence of at least 3 Roman villas in the local area. This meant to be his own agricultural estate. But it's debatable whether this hill fort continued to be occupied during the Roman era in Britain. But there was no major features that were constructed on this site of this period. So a lot of people think that this could have been something for storage throughout our time, or something where communities were still living. They just weren't adding on to it in this Roman period as well. Early medieval period, again, we start to see that there's more of a defence. We see that this is more of an importance here, with a community holding power and actually sticking out for everyone. But the excavations here were in 1913, and again, the evidence is going to be completely different to how we see it, different techniques, etc. But it's definitely something to look at, because they're in the Board of Celtic Studies, in their bulletin, there is a lot of information that's been brought here, but a plan of the fort is actually in the National Museum of Wales. So I had to sort of brush upon that, because I know we're kind of running spare for time, and I would like to delve into Dilys Powys in his own discussion completely and go through his history throughout time, especially the early medieval period, because we're finding evidence of glass as well being made in the early medieval period. This from not from Britain, they believe that is from possibly the Spain area, Italy area as well. So that'd be quite interesting to look at, and look at all the evidence in terms of that as well. But I think I'll end in all of that. I think for me, hill forts are fantastic aspects to look at. Definitely something to actually go and interact with when you're when you're walking about, you can actually go and interact with them, and it'd be interesting to see what more we can find from Pendennis and from Cairo as well. So there's something to look out for, but we will be doing Dinas Powys in the future in a more extensive way, just looking into it with a magnifying glass, because it's definitely fantastic. So if I stop sharing, I'll say, Anne, is there anything that you'd like to say at the end of all of this, really?
Well, only that we did have one of our members involved in the Cairo project, and he gave us lots of reports.
Oh wow, that's fantastic.
I don't know if you can remember, Richard. It was a couple, a young couple, and they were, sending us posts all the time. So that was good. It's really interesting to see the end, becoming substantial, and having a visitor centre, and it's really really positive. It was a very positive thing. Paul. And also I like the illustrations you've shown us of that hill fort in Shropshire. The hill Oswestry. And I didn't realise there was such a complete one there like that.
Yeah.
And of course some of our coastline has had hill forts on them.
Yeah.
It's been eroded away.
Yeah.
So, but you can see the ditches and banks, I think, in Lantwick Major. And
there's one in Barry, I believe, as well. Is
yeah,
the Bulwark?
and Southern
Yeah,
Down as well, So, but it's great to see the complete ones. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think we should have a look at it in the future of the ones that have been eroded away as well, because they deserve the focus definitely before they disappear. They won't disappear overnight, but definitely ones to focus on, because it's that, again, it's that comparison. But I think what we've seen through this is that just as much as England can provide us so much information, so can Wales as well. And I like that. Different feels to them in some sort of way, in terms each one is unique for the evidence that has been provided. But yeah, and definitely fantastic to see them all full, really, and not eroded away. But we will focus on the eroded ones in the future. So thank you for that, Anne. Thank you. Richard, anything that you'd like to say at the end?
No, really interesting subject and everything. I say another bulwarks is quite this fantastic rampart because they're all in the woods.
Yeah.
So then they've survived really well. Whereas lots of the hill forts, they've virtually just been ploughed away.
Yeah. And it's a shame.
So,
yeah, definitely.
The ramparts there are some online. I've seen, some of the pictures, and they are spectacular.
Yeah, it's definitely a fantastic one, and it's just a shame, really, isn't it, when you see them ploughed or gone, and it's something that you can't go and visit. But yeah, we will focus on them. The bulwarks, it was something that was really interesting to hear Carl talk about as well, and just the little things that he was showing us from when he was younger, when he would do his own little really investigations as a child. Well. Yeah,
it's really accessible as well. You haven't got to walk far.
No, definitely. Yeah, thank you, Richard. Thank you for that. And Pat, anything that you'd like to ask or add?
No, I think she's
yeah, but we'll leave her be. She bless her. Oh, bless her. What we'll do, I'll say goodnight to you both now, and I'll see you tomorrow, Anne.
Yes, I'll see you tomorrow, hopefully. And all our last minute goodbyes. Oh, hello. I don't know. Anyway, I better go. Good night.
Okay, take care, everyone.
Good night.
Yes,
North Star. Bye.
Bye. Bye.